Hi there. Welcome to the Lighthouse Sessions. I'm extremely excited because LaChelle Adkins is one of my favorite people. She is America's SuperMom. LaChelle, why don't you just tell us a little bit about who you are and how does one earn the title SuperMom?
Well, thank you so much for having me, Jeff. It is a pleasure to be here. I am known as America's Supermom, one, because my husband and I have 15 children. And it has been quite a journey with my mental health and business and relationships. And so that name was helped curated by a coach that I had in the UK around, being able to navigate the American dream in a way that made sense for me because I believed when I started out in my career that I either had to choose a career or be a mom. I had no idea that I could redefine the American dream to include both and do it successfully. So now I am a media strategist and I help small business owners to monetize their gifts and passions in the world and have a global impact through media. So I'm so excited to be here today and have a conversation. Thanks for having me.
Well, I'm excited. You and I talked, seems like forever ago, and
Hmm.
we talked about our networking philosophy. Now, I'm going to ask a question, then we're going to get into what you actually do.
Yes.
When you set out, you early days, did you know you were going to have 15 children? Um, I'm just curious because I
It
had
is so true. I know. Yeah. I don't think people wake up and say, I want to have 15 kids. But I was an only child and I knew that I wanted to have um, a family of five. Actually, that's what my husband and I agreed on. And the children just kept coming. I just was blessed with the deliveries. My husband was able to be there for every one of them. I didn't have any real complications. I just feel like it was definitely an anointing and a calling of some sort. So, yeah, I don't think I would have just signed up for that
I just
at
wanted to
all.
ask.
Okay.
I
Yeah.
had a firm belief. I didn't believe I was going to have kids, but then my wife convinced me otherwise. And
Mm.
I said, fine, we'll have kids, but we will never be outnumbered. I
Yeah.
have autism. I'm very practical. And I was like, if we have three kids, you take one to soccer, I take one to baseball. Who's taking the third to dance?
Yes.
And she didn't have an answer. And I said, okay, two is the limit.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like, I don't know what I was thinking with five. I think five is a lot. But
Five is ambitious. Yes.
yeah. So I think, I just had to have that willing spirit and then God took the rest from there.
Love it. And I think I heard this saying adapted. There is a quote that God will never give us more than we can handle.
Yeah.
And I heard with his help added on the end. And I went, oh, that makes sense.
That makes sense because definitely it is. I couldn't do it without him. I mean, I stay on my knees and I think that's why I'm short because I'm already closer to the ground. You know what I mean?
I love that. Now, I'm going to throw something at you because I have a feeling you are a kind and gentle soul, but I have a feeling if somebody says, LaChelle, I don't have time for that, I feel like you've got a mom look for that. Is that fair?
It's true. It's true. I'm working on it. My husband, well, early in our marriage, he used to always get on me about my facial expressions because he was like, people can tell everything about you without you saying anything. And so he really helped school me in that area. So I think I'm pretty composed in most times, but and I think the kids these days are different. You give them that mom look, they're like, what's going on with your face, mom? Are you
Yeah.
all right? My
Well,
older ones, you could give them the look, and that was that. These younger ones, they're like, "What is going on, mom? Are you all right?"
I actually taught my 12-year-old a look that stops stupid in its tracks. If somebody's asking him a dumb question, he just rolls his eyes, looks down at him, and they back away. And I'm like, oh, my work here is done. Um, So when somebody comes to you professionally and says, LaChelle, I'd love to work with you, I'd love to hang out with you, but I'm just too busy, you wouldn't understand. I feel like you, yeah, that's the look I was looking for.
It's true. I find it a blessing. When we learn a lot when we active listen. This is one of the things that I've really have grown in that skill set since the pandemic, because you had to really listen to understand and listen to hear what's not being said. So that really teaches me a lot about people. I listen to their language. I ask a qualifying question before I make a decision about something, and then I make that decision and move on.
I
So,
love it. And
mhm.
if you want something done, in my humble opinion, you give it to a busy person. So I'm going to guess that you, more than probably most of the people I know, you probably have systems and processes and communication styles. Is that fair?
Absolutely. Yeah, you can't. I learned the hard way. I was the best student because I'm one that really takes things to the limit. And my biggest lesson I think was just really finding my voice. I went through 13 years of depression. I was hospitalized 3 times, and a lot of that was the people pleasing, seeking validation from other people, not having boundaries, feeling like I had to be all things to all people, especially my kids and husband. And so you have to have systems and processes around the things that you want to get done. And it's not so much that you feel that you have to do everything. Right. Before, I was just exhausted because I was trying to do everything. I had to
Yeah.
be involved in everything. And I have a client now who shared this quote. She says, I can do anything, but not everything. And I just thought that was great. Okay. Because I was thinking I can do anything and everything. And I
Yeah.
learned the hard way that that's not true.
You can have anything or everything. You can't have
Hmm.
both. I love it. Now,
Hmm.
before we hit record, you shared a quote about keeping others warm. Would you care to share
Yes.
that again?
Yes, you don't have to set yourself on fire to keep other people warm.
And one of the things, so this is timely. A lot of entrepreneurs are in burnout mode, and part of
Mhm.
it is because we believe mistakenly that no one can do it the way we can do it. And we also tend to be people pleasers and we want to help others. So, how has that lesson manifested itself on, because I think you and I, we originally talked about networking
Mhm.
on my other show. How is that ability to set boundaries helped you be a better business person, a better mom, better family person?
Yeah, all around, all above. I think the biggest lesson I've learned with that is the power of sowing and reaping. And oftentimes, when it comes to business, we feel like we want to help everybody. We've got the next best thing since sliced bread. And so we feel that there's so much value in that. And the first thing we do a lot of times is give away that value for free. And so we think everybody can use it, even if we give it to them. And God says everything produces after its own kind. So if you plant something that's free, you're not going to reap anything of value, right? So I think the lesson that I had to learn was to understand my worth and realize that there has to be a co-investment, from somebody in order for them to even produce the results.
Yeah.
Because if it's free, they don't have a sense of urgency about doing the work, or a number of things happen as a result of something being free.
Yeah.
So that was the biggest lesson I learned, is that, you know, attach a dollar amount to your value, whatever that is, so that you can scale and continue to grow.
I love that. And I think that's I've inadvertently harmed people because well
Mhm.
intentioned, I give them access to stuff for free. And then they have 1,000 excuses. And because it was free, I don't push them, they don't push
Right.
themselves. And in the end, we just all wasted some time together, which my intention was not to do that. But when things are not, when they're given too freely, we don't value them.
It's true. Yeah.
And
I mean, and my thing is, I never would have people implement things, right? They would be putting it off, just like you said, excuses. This came up. There was no sense of urgency, no priority for it being done.
yeah,
But when they pay, then they are expecting a result from what they're paying for, and they pay attention and they hold you accountable to what you said, which you need that. It's a co-creation in the end, So yeah.
I love that word. And one thing I will point out, it is fascinating because literally, my last conversation, I was talking to an expert and I used the word monetize. And oh my God, she cringed. And I said, tell me what that word means to you, because you're in business, you've got a gift. What does monetize mean? And she said, it means greed, it means selling out, it means. And I said, wow, that's a fascinating take. So let's talk about monetize, because you used it early and I went, wow, somebody uses that word and says it in a happy way. So tell me what monetize means to you.
Yes. So for me, it is for you to understand your own worth and value. A lot of times we compare ourselves in business to other people that may be in our industry, which, there are some things that we can learn from other people, but just in what I do as a coach, a keynote speaker, an author, I know that my message is not the same as everybody else's. Even though I may be next to another lady on stage that's a mother, she has children, our stories are going to be different. And so one of the things that I do as a media strategist is I help people to really dive into what their passion is and ways that they can monetize that they don't even think about. So for you, for example, let's say you're doing this podcast and you decide to create a directory of all your previous guests. And then you ask them if they want to be in the directory for a small fee. So this directory, when people come and ask you, oh, do you have any guests that I could interview? Then you just send them a copy of your directory and everybody, is benefiting from that. It doesn't have to be a high value, but it's just different ways that you start recognizing that you have a network that's of value. It could be an ebook on tips to do to onboard guests, questions that you ask, how to make the guests feel comfortable, how to follow up. That's an ebook that you can monetize, right? So I think, for me, I really like to build relationships with people that are in my network and help them to take a lot of the stress out of the way that they think they have to always monetize. It doesn't always have to be the clients or, high ticket items. It could be the things that you do every day. I had a lady on LinkedIn and she put a checklist on Gumroad. And so she was known as this person who helps you with your LinkedIn follow-up. I think she charged, I don't even remember, I bought it to support her, but I want to think it was maybe $10. Yeah. But she was getting another stream of income because people kept asking her the same thing. And so she put it in a format that everybody could get it at their leisure. And it was some extra money for her. So, yeah.
And, I'm going to say, and I appreciate, first of all, you and I met through Bob Berg. So I will tell you, I've made every possible mistake, every misinterpretation of the 5 laws of stratospheric success. And one of the ones that kept tripping me was receptivity. I would help people. And when Bob explained it to me, I was like, oh, crap. But one of the things I want to say, and I want your take on this, I was one of those people, if something came easy to me, let's call it one of God's gifts, I didn't appreciate it because I didn't earn it. And, I was taught anything worth having comes through hard work. So I would give away my gifts under the mistaken notion that that's what generosity looked like. And
Mm,
and it turned a lot of resentment in me because I would give somebody a gift, and I see books everywhere. So when I talk to somebody, I'm like, oh, you should write a book about that. And then I will go and write a book about it, and they'll give them the book and say, here you go, you can publish it. And then they don't publish it. And I'd be
mhm.
like, what the hell's wrong with you? And what I realized was, by devaluing my gift, I
Right.
was devaluing the gift I gave them. And they went, oh, okay, well, it took them, a little while, and it wasn't a big deal. But
Mhm.
if you sell your gifts, then people can appreciate them, and they pay for them and they value them. Is that a fair comment?
Yeah, well, I think, see, we have these terms that are in business that don't always align with our beliefs. So for some people, a lot of people have problems with the word sale, right? And so we have replaced that with value. And so value is understanding that, it's a cooperative relationship, whereas somebody is giving you something of value because it's going to be making them more valuable, right? So I would like to have a car that I value rather than be walking in the rain or on a motorcycle or a bicycle,
Yeah.
right? I want to value that. So the problem that I think a lot of us have is that we are not clear on what value we're bringing. And that's because we're comparing ourselves to other people. But when you know who you are and what you deliver, I love what you said before we even got started. Now the audience that you want to speak to with your podcast, because you've had a lot of experience with a lot of different guests, and the direction that it was going, it was not in alignment because you just didn't have that clarity. And I know that happened for me when I started with podcasts. I was all over the place. I was like, oh, this is fun. And you just learn different things. And then
Yeah.
after a while, you start getting burnt out on certain consistent things that come up, and you decide, you know what? Why am I burning myself out with this? I don't have to do this way.
Yeah.
No. And so this is how we learn, right? Through experience. So I think the issue is that we sometimes don't have the confidence about what our value is. And we want people to say yes. We don't
Yeah.
want people to say no. So we try to do jump flips and all these things, which I've learned, you know what? I am not an acrobat, so I don't have a problem saying no. You know what I mean?
I love that. And I think that comes back to boundaries, because
Yeah.
when I first started out as a coach, it's like, oh, I can help you with that. Oh, I can help you with that. Oh, I can do that. And then what I realized was I was busy spinning a bunch of plates, and then they'd come back and they'd be like, oh, we solved that yesterday. Oh, okay, then I could have slept last night instead of doing research.
Is that not true? I tell you, I have lost so much sleep trying to do things that I'm not gifted at.
Yeah.
And then that's the thing, they didn't ask me, I offered,
Yeah.
so I set myself up for that.
Yeah.
So I've learned, being on the other side, that I can go to sleep, I can take a day off, I can go on vacation, I can do a number of things. I can get off work early if I want to, because now I know how to collaborate and I know how to stay in my lane around the things that I am gifted in.
I love that. And I think that's, again, recognizing, and between you and me, I journal with Chat GPT a lot. It
Mhm.
helps me refine, because I'll say, oh, I'm good at these things. It'll say, well, which of those do you love? And, it helps me get to the point of, my zone of genius, not my scattered universe of competence where, on a good day, I nail it. And on a bad day, I really mess it up.
It's true. I mean, we all have that. And I think having that ability to really hone in on what we enjoy and diving all in with that, I think for me, it's been a game changer, because I realized, I don't have to be the tech savvy person. And I can admit that, laugh at myself, and keep it moving. Before, I would be like, oh my gosh, I got to learn this new system or whatever. When
Yeah.
new things come out, I connect with people that are tech people, and I let them, guide me through that process, because I really don't want to go through all the learning of the technology, because next week it's going to be something new anyway. And
Yeah.
I've just exercised so much frustration trying to figure it out when it's obsolete next week. It just doesn't
Yeah.
make sense to me.
I love that. And I think that's one of the powerful things, is recognizing what comes easy. And, I did an episode once about, I called it the $10,000 hour. And a
Mhm.
lot of people pushed back on me and they called me greedy. And I was like, think about what you're saying, that we don't have some genius moment, some inspirational moment where we can generate that much value to someone. And I didn't say how to charge $10,000 an hour. The
Mhm.
statement was how to add $10,000 an hour of value to someone else.
Mhm.
And I think, you and I connecting through Bob, it's, the question I always have is, how do you give the man who has everything a gift? And the gift is, I used to be literal. It was like, who can I introduce to Bob? And then
Mhm.
what I realized was, the gift is, who can I introduce Bob to through his books?
Mhm.
And, I love Bob and I want to do things to help him. One of my aha moments is I can buy a bunch of copies of his book and send it to people.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating because it's a wonderful filter. Either people read it and love it and say, oh my God, tell me more.
Mhm.
Or 6 months later, oh, I didn't read it. Okay, thank you.
It's true. I tell you, I'm a book lover, and so even that, I buy so many books, and it's like, my husband is like, why are you buying another book? You have thousands already. You can't even read them all. But I
Yeah,
don't know. It's just something about the energy. And I feel like, books, I like to have it in hand because I can go back and reread it or underline it. I don't know, something about having it in my hand. But I think, um, it's like anything else with coaching. If the people are ready, they're going to receive it.
yeah,
And my son gave me a book, The Four Agreements, and it was a year before I even opened the book up, and it changed my life.
yeah.
And I'm thinking, man, I could have been a lot further along if I read that book when he gave it to me. You know what I'm saying?
Well,
But yeah,
the reality is you weren't ready, so you wouldn't
yeah,
have been further along. And
it's true.
I am. I was rethinking a bunch of quotes that I heard in my youth, and one was, "When the student is ready, the teacher
Mhm.
slash master will appear."
Yeah.
And I realized, again, I can be very literal. I was waiting for some master to show up at my door, and
Mm,
then I realized I was the master letting the knowledge in.
true.
And I went, oh crap, how many times have I ignored the knocking sound? And opportunity was like, go away, I'm busy.
It's true.
and
Yeah.
and
We can have so many distractions. And, I know for me, I was my worst enemy because I felt like I knew everything,
yeah,
so people were telling me stuff and I wasn't hearing it because I was thinking they don't know what they're talking about, or I don't need any help in this area, just different things. So, yeah,
yeah. And that's the thing, when we think we know everything, that's when we're dangerous to ourselves. when
absolutely.
when we don't know everything, that's when we can be dangerous to others. But
Yes, it's true. And so I tell people, one of the things that I ask now when people have that attitude that they know everything, I just say, so how is that working for you? Yeah,
I
because
still
I know
quote,
it's not working.
yeah,
Okay.
I think Dr. Phil should trademark that phrase, because I use it in coaching all the time. And
Yeah.
it's like, how is that working out for you? And
Hmm.
I can't say it with quite the right Southern drawl, but it is fascinating when somebody knows with absolute certainty that someone else is the problem, and they keep blaming
Hmm.
someone else. And I say, how's that working out for you? And they go, oh crap.
Yeah, it's true. We have to be able to see that reflection. that we're putting out, with other people. So it's true. That's a hard pill to swallow, but it is the best way to change your life, is to be able to look at yourself in the mirror and do the work on yourself. So I totally agree with that.
I love it. And for what it's worth, LaChelle, one of my mentors said to me, you will not heal or move forward or live into your power until you realize that the only person causing you problems is the one looking back at you in the mirror. And my first reaction was, how dare you? And I fought him for a while. And then when I figured it out, I went, oh my God, thank you. Because all of a sudden I realized in one way or another, all of the challenges I faced were put before me to teach me to not do that thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I was the one who could choose to hear the message, right?
It's true. And I think, what I learned from my journey was the more that I put the blame on other people, the less power and control I had.
Yeah.
Once I just said, hey, you know what? I'm taking accountability for, what happened, at least as much as I can, then I can do something different that can really change the outcome. But as long as I continue to blame other people, then I'm always going to be a victim. So yeah, that's what happened for me.
And that's what I found with my wellness magazine and my wellness podcast. I attracted a lot of people who were very adamant that I'm a better victim than you are. Like it became about whose victimhood or victimness was worse. And I'm like, it's not a competition. Anybody wins. There's an old movie that I think it was Notting Hill, where whoever tells the worst sob story gets the brownie for dessert because there's only one. And I'm like, I don't want the brownie. I'd rather figure out the real prize is doing the work, figuring it out. And then, and once I realized I was the one breaking myself, I could, number one, stop damaging. And then number two, like you said, control, start fixing.
It's true. Well, and I think also, it's the victimhood that we have in our own mind, right? Yeah. A lot of the things that even happen is because of our thinking. So I just recall so many times I would not say things or do things because I've rehearsed in my head me and what the other person is saying. And I don't give them a chance to speak. I'm just going on with my own story that is not right. And so the minute that I began to take accountability for me, then I had space for other people to share whatever they want to share. But before that, I was them and me all in one, having this whole conversation without even talking to them.
I love it. And you said something very profound in there that really resonated with me. Sometimes, okay, so one of the questions I kept asking when I was starting to do the work was, how can I add value? And it became so obsessive. It was, how do I add value? And somebody told me it's by making space. And what are you talking about? That's crazy. And then I realized by working on myself, I was stepping back from whatever was going on in front of me. And I literally gave somebody space to step into me rather than me leaning in and telling them, and I love the sales phrase, if there's pushback, it's because you pushed first.
Yeah.
And, I never understood in sales, there's an expression, you need to let go of wanting the outcome or controlling the outcome. Yeah. And I'm like, well, that's dumb. Why would I go to a sales call if I didn't want them as a client? But what I realized was it's about the energy. I now approach every conversation not about what I want. It's is working together, is collaborating, is this adding value to you? And honestly, just giving somebody space to breathe is a huge gift.
It's so true. Because, they call it sales breath, when you are just constantly thinking about the sale. And I had somebody who came in my community, and I have like different things where people are guest speakers and all this. And so they left the presentation and later on followed up with some of the people that attended. And they were just bottom line, hey, get this program. This is what it costs. And the person who was in my community came back and asked me my thoughts. And I said, so did they even ask you what your goals were? What you aspire to do? I mean, is this in alignment with anything?
Yeah.
No. So I'm just like, that's what happens when we are focused on what we want and we're not hearing the other person, because when we just even pause to ask questions, and then people get clients and then they're like, you know what, they're just not a good fit. Well,
Yeah.
you should have asked them that before. You
Yeah.
know what I'm saying, because everybody is not your client. They may afford you, they may have something similar that what they may need, you think you can provide, but everybody is not a good fit. So it's your responsibility, if you're going to be providing a service
Yeah.
or providing them a product, for you to figure that out before you sell it to them.
I love that. And, it's funny, LaChelle, because I have a program I used to run. I canceled it a while ago, but it was called the Launchpad. And
Mm-hmm.
I realized that letting the wrong people onto the Launchpad, I was causing them harm because, if they didn't want to go to space, figuratively, but if they didn't
Mm-hmm.
want to launch their business, they're going to fight and scream and kick. And I'm actually taking value away, because then they leave burnt and badly scarred going, oh, I'm not a business person. Or,
Mm-hmm.
they made up stories. And somebody, one of my podcast guests said this, I think it was Jeff West, actually.
Mm-hmm.
He said, I don't want to be the reason someone loses their faith.
That's
And
good.
I was like, Jeff, you're going to make me cry here. But,
It's true.
if only more people showed up and that was their mantra. I mean, it would be nice, first of all, if religious leaders did that. But,
Mm-hmm.
just in business, if you're a coach, a consultant, a mentor, and just say, I don't want to be the reason somebody loses faith in this industry.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how profound is that energy shift? Um,
It's Yeah, it really is true. I think, we can sometimes focus too much on ourselves and our business, that we are not thinking about being a good steward, of the people that we're serving and people that are watching.
yeah.
Right. So I love that. That's really good.
Well, and there's a oft quoted thing on the internet. I think it says, "Become the person your dog already thinks you are." And for
Mhm.
me, it was, be the person my sons already think I am,
Yeah.
because you know whether I know it or not, there's two sets of eyes always on me. You've got 15, but they're taking mental notes, and I don't care about accolades, awards. But when I do something and my kids are proud of me, that
Mm.
is the greatest currency in the world.
Amen. Totally agree.
You know,
And, yeah, and it's true. And I think, with that is really being able to help our kids to, we model this behavior, because everything is not going to be roses. Every
yeah,
client is not going to be a good client, or every situation is not going to have that happy ending. Right. And so, just being thoughtful around the fact that, we have to model, as Christians, how we should respond to these things, because we are going to have challenges. God says we're going to have tribulation, but understanding how to model that for our kids. There was a time when I was going through this depression, I had a lot of unrealistic expectations that I even put on my kids. And they just believe that me and their dad never argued. Everything was perfect. And even today, I feel like some of my daughters don't have certain relationships because they're thinking that the person has to be perfect, you know.
yeah.
So we really have to be careful with some of the things that we're modeling for our kids.
I love that. And a friend of mine, she's a therapist, and she said it well. She said, two halves don't make a whole.
Mm,
And she said, if you're not complete, you're not going to be, in a good union. You both need to acknowledge the imperfect bits, And you need to work on yourselves because, again, everybody's, oh, I can fix this person. No, you can't.
Right. It's true. I mean, when we're not, how are we going to fix somebody if we're not fixed?
Yeah.
It's so true. And I think, the whole thing of when you understand and embrace who you are, you realize that you're not going to be perfect.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's so much peace in that. It used to be that I would just micromanage myself to craziness.
Yeah.
Everything had to be perfect. The kids' beds had to be made. Their shoes need to be in the right spot. I have to make the right, dessert and meal. And I was just like living a crazy lifestyle. But when I embraced, okay, I don't mind cooking. I'm not the one that loves doing the laundry, so I'm going to have that be a chore. I mean, once you start learning to embrace the things that you're good at, even with my kids, certain chores,
Yeah.
Certain ones will get because they don't have a problem with it. They enjoy that. So I think, really understanding that you don't have to be good at all things is a game changer, and finding a way to work together to create that united front, where everybody can contribute in a way where they feel whole doing so.
And I find that metaphor applies to business as well. Yes, it's definitely in the family, but in the business, a friend of mine used to say, don't should all over yourself. And I think as entrepreneurs, as founders, we think we should be able to do this, should be able to do that. And sometimes, I hear this in parents and I hear this in entrepreneurs. Well, they should know to pick this up, or they should know to do the laundry for me. And it's like, did you ask? Well, no, they should know.
No mind readers here. Okay.
Yeah. I always tell my wife, and this is something I've said since the beginning, I don't own a crystal ball. I don't mind read. You need something, ask and it will come to you. If you don't ask, I am not going to guess. It's just,
sure.
Now I try to figure things out, but if I'm guessing, I'm going to be wrong at least half the time. So
it's true. It's true. I love that. That's good.
And it's fascinating. I can only imagine your world. As a parent, I was naive enough to believe I was here to teach my kids. And we
were on that same train.
And then I realized if I'm just quiet and I let them teach me, the lessons have been huge. And I would honestly say I've become a better business person, a better leader by the training my children have patiently given me. So what do you say to that?
I totally agree. And I think, that helps me to be more of an active listener in business because, children will really, they're like a sponge for things that they are curious and interested in.
Yeah.
And a lot of times we shoo that curiosity away. But when we don't, and when we're present with that, it is so easy to teach them, because they're ready. It's like they've got their pens out, they are taking pictures, doing whatever, because it is time. It is something that they are interested in. And so I think that's the same thing with our business. We miss those moments because we can be so focused on doing what everybody else is doing that, we are not present with someone when it's time to be present, whether it's on a Zoom call and you've got 1,000 tabs open, you're over here trying to multitask. People can tell,
what's that clickety clack sound?
Exactly. Or they're saying something, repeating themselves over and over because they're looking at something else. Okay.
Yeah.
So I think, that ability to be present, you don't have to go back and do the work again, right? Yeah. You can do it in real time and not have any issue. But when we are distracted and doing 1,000 things, it's like the work is all over again. I was just having this conversation earlier because I have a coaching that we do where we have mastermind classes. And I don't do replays with that. And, the person was like, well, you should record it. I'm thinking, no,
I'm
because
not giving you permission to ignore me.
well, because what happens is you end up doing double work, because
Yeah.
if they do listen to the replay, oh, you know what? You've made this statement about this, and what did that mean? So then I'm going back, taking extra time, and I'm like, no, I'm not doing that. I'm not doing it.
Well, another day, LaChelle, I will happily have this conversation. I do record mine. I don't share the video, but
Mm-hmm.
what I do is I turn it into workbooks and I say,
Oh,
okay, you need to work on this.
oh, that's good. Yeah, I
So,
love that.
yeah. So if you don't mind that conversation, you and I, we can do that offline.
Yeah,
But
that's good. Hey, I'm always willing to learn, and I'm writing that down. I got my pen and paper.
so between you and I and everybody that's going to listen to this, I personally love AI. And one of the things I find absolutely amazing is if you record and transcribe. So I agree with you 100%. I give you the video, we're both going to hate it and we're both going to do work. But
Mm-hmm.
what I do is I ask AI to clean the transcript, summarize it, and then you put in headings and subheadings. AI is amazing at that. And then I'll
Mm.
say, could you create an exercise or some journaling prompts so I can turn, oh God, I don't watch it, I don't care how long it is. I will not rewatch a mastermind meeting ever. Um,
Mhm.
but if I can turn it into 6 questions that bring it home, that's where I can add value to people without any of us having to rewatch the video.
Love that. That's good stuff. I
So
love
those
that.
are the weird things I do. I'm happy to share that with you offline, because AI can actually accelerate learning, because we don't have to rewatch the video.
That's good stuff.
Because
Now, see, I'm learning something new. I'm glad I was actively listening.
Well, and the beautiful thing, and so I will share the notes from the show with you because I think we both, there's quite a few things I learned,
Hmm.
and I love this is how go givers add value. It's not okay, LaChelle, what do you do? Okay, sell it to me. Okay, I got this. I'm going to sell it to you.
Right.
Um, let's talk. Last piece. I want to add value to my audience, and
Okay.
the value I believe I can add is shining your amazing light into their universe. So, how does somebody work with you? What does that look like? And where do they start?
Yeah. Well, I have a number of things. I do have a lot of kids, y'all. So I believe in multiple streams of income. But I'm passionate about speaking about wellness and being your own advocate. So if they want me to speak on those topics around boundaries and systems and processes, especially juggling a large family, parenting, being a wife, and all that. I also am a coach to help people with their mindset and navigating the ups and downs of life, but understanding how to embrace, what they're gifted at, but also learn to let go and recognize that their worth is not attached to the things that they do good or do bad. Okay, so I do that. And then currently, I am looking for content creators who have content on Facebook or YouTube and they want to put them on television where they can monetize those episodes. So I have a micro channel on the Zandra TV network, and I have a Spanish channel, a Spanish show. I have 2 other talk shows, and I'm looking for, different topics around personal development. I spoke with someone earlier that has like a game show type of situation. So I would like to have game shows, maybe children's shows. I just want a plethora of things around personal development
Okay.
that could be interesting for my audiences. So yeah, that's what I've got going on. And they can connect with me through email, info@LaChelleAdkins.com. I'm on every social media platform. So I won't even waste time listing all those. But
Well, I'll make life really simple. You and I are deeply connected on LinkedIn. We know a lot of
yes,
common people. So if you can't find LaChelle somewhere, come to LinkedIn and say, Jeff,
yes.
help me. And I would say anybody watching this, so LaChelle, the good news is I have a lot of people that need to meet you.
Oh,
Before I get around to all of them, please feel free to reach out to LaChelle. She is truly, and I say this sincerely, LaChelle, you are one of those bright lights. I adore you, and I really respect you. And anybody who loves their kids as much as you do is my kind of people. So thank
I
you for sharing
appreciate
that.
I appreciate that. And I will leave them with a tip about networking because this is how we got connected. So I was doing a LinkedIn audio with Bob Burke. And what I did was made the event. And then I looked in his profile and reached out to people that were in his network to
Yes.
invite them to the audio event. And
Yeah.
so that's how you and I got connected.
Yeah. And it's been, I think you and I were best friends almost instantly. And,
Yes.
it's as simple as that when you find the right people. And, LaChelle, I shared this before we started, but my goal is to send a whole bunch of people, bring Bob Berg into their lives. So
Hmm.
if you're watching this and you love the energy between us, I'm not going to tell you to go stalk Bob. I'm going to say go buy a copy of The Go Giver. Actually, no,
Absolutely.
buy 10 copies, give it to 9 friends, and sit down and have a book club. Because if you don't bond over the book, you don't need to reach out to LaChelle and I, because we'll just annoy you. Is that fair, LaChelle?
That's fair. That's fair. It's true. I mean, and I love that point about the book club. Book clubs for me are powerful because you get the book read,
Yeah.
right? When you have a club and that accountability, otherwise you'll open up the book, read a few pages, and move on to something else. So
Yeah.
I love that you mentioned that.
Well, it's funny because I always message Bob and say, okay, Bob, my kids refer to him as Uncle Bob because
Hmm.
in the car, they don't know it, but we're having book club. And I
That's
ask them
good.
things about the book. And I'm trying to raise 2 little go-givers, and they're pure at heart, and they're going to do it naturally. But
Mhm.
I'm not ready to say, here, read the book. However, I can share stories from the book. And of course, whenever Bob posts on LinkedIn, I say, hey, guess what Uncle Bob said today? So,
Love that. That's so good. Yeah. And, those are the moments I think sometimes we make it too over the top, right?
yeah,
And so we never get started. But if you just do those little baby steps along the way, you'll
yeah.
be surprised a year down the road, 5 years down the road, how far you've come.
Well, and the big lesson for me was ask the question and then shut up. Because, I can tell them what I think, but now I say, hey, here's what Uncle Bob said. What do you think?
Yeah.
And it is fascinating because they go from quiet passengers to all of a sudden they're just they light up because Dad wants to know what they think, and I honestly do. So,
That's so good. Yeah.
well,
Mhm.
LaChelle, you are America's supermom. You're also just a superhuman. So, thank you for hanging out with me and being on the show.
Well, thanks so much for having me. And I'm looking forward to another collaboration. I got my notes about those workbooks and AI.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, LaChelle.
All right.